Welcome to the Berean Lens, where we strive to search the Scriptures daily, where we attempt to prove all things, where context, truth, and Scripture matter. This is the Berean Lens.
Wow, welcome to the Berean Lens. Don't forget the Berean Challenge. Search the Scriptures daily and prove all things. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. How you doing,
pretty
Michael?
good today.
Justin, not Justin. Harvey, you have a plug for us?
Yeah, I wanted to throw out there for our Facebook and YouTube followers, those that may be following us online, ask that you guys like and subscribe, share our videos, share our shorts that we throw out there. Of course, our main focus of doing that is to spread the gospel. We want to make sure that we're doing that, and we can get that done through help through the viewers that are actually sharing that out there. So,
yeah, we like to see interaction from everybody, and especially if you have any questions or comments, we definitely want to hear from you about anything that you might have.
Yeah, that's actually really good because we've had a few questions and comments, and so if we can get those people out there that has those questions, that would be awesome. You can reach us obviously through on Facebook or YouTube, and we also have an email address, which is at thebereanlens@gmail.com. So if you have questions or comments, please share it with us.
Yeah. So we have a good program set up today, I think. And what are we talking about?
Well, it is a good and very timely topic. We're talking about the importance of a godly father. So one might ask, why is that even a question now?
Well, that's a very important question.
And how does it relate to our world today? You know, how does it affect our lives personally, or even indirectly?
So the world tells us, one thing, and of course the Bible tells us a different thing, and that's kind of what we're wanting to get into today. But as me and Michael and Justin was talking about this a little bit, me and Michael had decided maybe we need to go out and just look and see from a worldly view, what do statistics show as far as, like, is there anything out there that shows us the effects of a fatherless home?
Yeah, because there's a clear, contrast between our society today and what the Bible says, and how we try to live faithfully to God's pattern for our lives. So there is a stark contrast between the two, and it seems like that divide is growing even further away. And I think that we can see the effects of that in the lives of a lot of people.
Yeah, tree is known by its fruit. So when you look at fatherless homes, what fruit do they produce? And that's where the statistics come in. Mm-hmm. But keeping in mind that statistics can be manipulated and taken with a grain of salt, but there are several sources you could look to, and they all show the same trend that we're going to talk about here when Harvey talks about the statistics.
And this is something that has been studied over time as well, and proven in many different studies.
Yeah. So I went through and done a little research online. Obviously, there's so many AI tools out there that you can go out and get a lot of statistics. And of course, it's a very helpful tool, but we know, like you said, we need to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, right? The numbers that I'm getting ready to read, again, doesn't necessarily mean that they're 100% accurate, but we know that, like you said, the statistics do show that a fatherless home, there are things that are associated with that. So the first one is crime and incarceration. And so the numbers that I found was 85% of youth in prison come from a fatherless home. And so that's a massive number. 85% of those that are in prison, are from a fatherless home.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is an incredible statistic to have a rate that high that can be directly tied or correlated to whether there is a father figure in the home.
Yeah, it's a big number. And then carrying on, 75% of adolescent murderers come from fatherless homes. Also, 65% of prisoners grew up without a father. Youth from fatherless homes are 3 times more likely to be incarcerated by age 30. And then fatherless boys are 5 times more likely to be arrested by the age of 18. So, I mean, the numbers, like I said, whether the numbers are a few percentage measurements off, that's a huge statistic there that we read. If you were to go further and check, you can look in the, gang activity is a big deal whenever they look at the gang activity. Father's absence is linked to 2 times higher gang membership, and fatherless boys are 4 times more likely to be involved in gang activity. So luckily we live in a place, in Wayne, Oklahoma and Madill, Oklahoma, where we don't have to worry a lot about gang activity. But we know in Oklahoma City and some of the surrounding areas, it's a real thing. And it's contributed a lot to being, without a father in the home, without that man figure to help them know where to go.
Yeah, they're searching for something and they're finding it in the wrong places.
Absolutely. Also, just checking in a few more little stats here. Behavioral disorders. Kids without fathers are 20 times more likely to have behavioral disorders. And some of those behavior disorders are like ADHD, linked to ADHD. It says they're 4 to 5 more times likely to develop that kind of a behavior. It also is linked to depression and emotional struggles. So fatherless children are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with depression. And I kind of shared a story with you guys earlier on a friend of mine that was dealing heavily with depression and tried to do a really good job of hiding it. But so that one really hits home to me. Depression is not a good thing, and it can lead people down a bad path. And so being from a fatherless home can cause you to be more of a depressed person. We can look at suicide rates. If you wanted to go into the suicide rate, 63% of youth suicides come from fatherless homes. And so that's a huge statistic there. And it's kind of a sad thing, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's also linked to substance abuse. So when you look at the crime-related risk of substance abuse, adolescents without fathers are 3.5 times more likely to use drugs on a regular basis. We know where that would lead. 60% of chronic juvenile offenders are from fatherless homes. So it directly affects that. We also have the family relationship and your social outcomes. So when it comes to your daughters, the girls raised fatherless are 8 times more likely to become teenage mothers. Mm-hmm. And I think we understand the things that would cause for a young lady. So
and a lot of those teenage pregnancies are outside of marriage. So that's something.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So again, I've got tons of more stats. I don't want to sit here and just read statistics all day long, but we did do a little bit more research and the fact that, so we're mainly focusing on fathers today, right? That's the main focus.
Yeah,
But,
all of those things paint a pretty vivid picture, and that is that having a father in the household to provide some direction, to provide some protection, to provide these things for the children, it does have real implications that directly affect the outcomes of their children. And I think that's something that we can draw a conclusion that we can draw from these things, and it's something that I would like to explore a little further in the context of a Christian relationship.
And speaking of the Christian relationship, I know we got some scripture we want to dive into, but a stable, I want to add the mother in there as well, right? We're talking about fathers today, but we talked about the fact of a Christian values and Christian family. And so stable 2-parent homes dramatically reduce the risk across all domains, which is what I had wrote down here and studied. It actually increases the fact that they'll have a better education, better behavior, crime rates go down, incarceration goes down, poverty is a whole lot different, and of course their emotional well-being. So when you have a father who is fulfilling his role the way the Bible states that he should, and then you have a mother that's doing the same on her role. We know the father and the mother have different roles. When they are both playing the part and doing what they're supposed to do, these numbers are even more in a good way.
Yeah, and I think it plays right into God's plan for the family. And each one, both fathers and mothers having a distinct role, and they bring something different to the structure of the family, and both have their own impacts. So we don't want to negate the importance of the mothers.
Sure.
But today we're talking about the impacts that a father has.
Right.
Yeah, we could talk about mothers at a different occasion because that's very important. And I think it's important that the viewer don't take this as an attack on women, because it's really not.
Right.
It's an attack on men who
That's exactly
aren't performing.
What it is.
Performing the obligation that they have for their families.
And Justin, that's a good point, because whenever me and Michael started talking about this in the beginning, this was something that I wanted to bring in. It was really more my thought process was to challenge the men.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into this more, but the world,
to find that purpose.
Exactly, to find that purpose. A man has a role in the Bible, and God has laid out the role for the man. And if we don't open the scripture and look and find out, we don't find purpose in our life as a man. And I think we're lacking, and we try to fill that void with bad things. And we see the bad things in the stats that we just saw. And so again, this is an attack on men. This is a call to the men out in this community and all that may be listening that, we have an important role to play as fathers and as men in the church. And it's important that we fill that role.
that structure and that discipline is there in your child's life. I think a lot of those statistics we read is a breakdown of that structure and discipline that you should be imparting to your children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So from a biblical standpoint, and as we look into scripture, if we were to we could probably turn to multiple different locations, right?
Yeah.
But where would we look in the Bible? Where is one place we may be able to go to find an example of a father fulfilling that role? Is there?
Well, we're going to look at 1 Kings chapter 2, look at David as an example of a godly father passing on godly wisdom. But before we get to that, I think it would be interesting to just think about from the world's perspective on how important is a man. What does the world say about men in general? How important are they?
Well, there's a growing movement that is trending away from the importance of strong father figures or strong manly figures. And in fact, not only moving away from it, but painting it in a different light completely, painting it as something that is bad or something that is from a negative context,
Yeah, it might be a pet peeve of mine, but people say toxic masculinity all the time nowadays. And the truth is there's no such thing as toxic masculinity. If it's true masculinity, there's nothing toxic about it. When you look at the roles of the man and the women typically help to develop children emotionally and even spiritually, but they don't do the same when it comes to structure and discipline. That's where a father really steps in. And not to attack women, but you look at those statistics, most of those people in prison, they came from a household with one parent. It's a mother. It's a single mother. So it's not an attack on women, but I think that it shows that you can't do it on your own. Yeah. People say, I don't need a man. I don't need a father. I don't need this. Well, the fruit says something different. You absolutely need a mother. You absolutely need a father. It's almost like God designed it that way intentionally.
You think?
Yeah.
Well, I think just by our nature as well, it comes more natural to us to be that disciplinarian, that one that provides structure, that one that thinks about it logically and is influenced by the emotional aspects of it. And again, that's where women complement men because it is something more natural to them. But sometimes you need that firm discipline. You need that to teach your children that, well, there is right and there is wrong, and you need to be able to control yourself when it comes to the two.
And it takes a man to do that. It takes a father to do that. What you see in the world a lot right now is why you see celebrities, they'll say things like, I'm going to wait until they're a certain age, and then the kid is going to tell me what they need in order to develop. Like, I want to develop them how they want to be developed. And it's like, that's not good parenting.
Right.
It's our responsibility as parents. Men are supposed to teach their sons how to be men and how to treat women. And men are supposed to be examples for their daughters and teach them what a man is supposed to look like and protect them and guide them. He sets the expectation.
Yeah. And go ahead.
It is our job to teach our children what they need to do in order to be productive citizens. It's not for us to sit back and wait. They'll tell me when they need it.
Yeah.
Then they wonder why their parents or their children are all messed up.
And unfortunately, go ahead.
No, you've been trying to.
No, you're good. I was just going to. Unfortunately, Hollywood is where we put Hollywood up on a pedestal, and you just mentioned that tons of times how Hollywood sets the standard for us.
Yeah, and I was going to say,
unfortunate.
You have to start early because they're developing from the moment they're born. They're taking all this in. So if you wait until they're adolescents, you've already missed all the critical years that you need to be instilling good godly values into their life.
Instead of showing them what you're supposed to be, you're showing them a weak, spineless,
teaching them
person
to
that's gonna-
live by their own pleasures.
yeah.
And like I said earlier, that lacks that discipline and that structure in their life. And then once they get to adulthood, they're lost. It's like a deer in headlights,
Well, Justin, you mentioned there that we're supposed to be teaching them. If we wait too long to teach them,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the shorts that we were going to do had mentioned the fact that if fathers are not stepping up to teach their children, if they're waiting, like you said, and you made an important comment there that the children are learning whether we're teaching or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're not teaching them, someone else is, whether that be TV, Facebook, phones, other kids around them, somebody's teaching them.
Well, that's why they go to gangs. They're looking for some kind of discipline, some kind of something, and the gangs provide that.
Yeah.
But it's not healthy.
Right.
So I guess we can get to the verses now. So what does a godly father look like? And I suppose before we get into David, you can look at David's life and you can see where he has some weaknesses, where he has some failures, where he sins.
Mhm.
And I
like
think it's
David because he seemed real. you
Yeah.
know.
I can relate to David.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most people can relate to David.
And the fact that he's humble.
But
Mhm.
when you see David, and with my children, I always had the mindset, like Anna and I talked about it before kids were even in the picture. We said we didn't want to present them something that was unreal. So we said, if we do argue, we're not going to hide it from the children. We're going to let them see what a healthy argument or a healthy disagreement looks like, and see how after the disagreement has been resolved, how you come back together and you're still one. They need to see that not everything is perfect, and there are ways around it, and you can still thrive in it. So you look at David, you're going to see in his life, he messed up. But what example he set for his kids was, he's a man after God's own heart. Even though he sins, even though he messes up, he always turns back to God. God was always his source of strength. It was always he relied on God above anything and everything else.
And he exemplifies that right here in this passage, because even if you look at it in the context of chapter 2, these are his dying words to his son. These are the things that are important to him, that he wants to pass on, that he wants to impart on them. This is the last time that he will get to establish it. And there are some things here that have to do with his reign, and he didn't. And I'm assuming that he doesn't want these same things to plague Solomon's reign as a king. But first and foremost, in these verses, it's God first. We've got to establish the foundation for you here without me. We have to establish the foundation of you becoming a man, of standing up now and assuming that role. And that begins with your relationship with God.
So you want to look at the first verse? And then,
Yeah. Well, I might also just add, that in the context of this, and we kind of alluded to this through David's life, this was a lifestyle for him. It wasn't he says in here to follow the commandments, the statutes, the judgments, whatever, and those were a list of things to do. But this is more than that. This is a lifestyle that David lived himself, and we can see that throughout his life, and he's wanting that same thing, for his son and as his legacy and the generations to come.
Yeah, I think when David tells him to walk in his ways, it kind of shows that it's a journey. It's not just, It just kind of shows what you were saying.
Yeah, so I was just saying that a little bit of the context of where this is coming from.
So I've got verse 1 of 1 Kings chapter 2 up on the screen there, if one of you guys would like to read it.
Now the days of David drew nigh that he should die, and he charged Solomon his son, saying. So you see there, as Justin already pointed out, it's the end of his life. He's the final words, and he charges Solomon. And so when he says charged, it's not saying this is a suggestion. This isn't if you want to. When you look at this, verse 4 kind of finishes that he says that the Lord may continue his word which he spake. Like if you want a certain outcome, this is what must be done to achieve that outcome. Now, we're not under the law of Moses today. We're under the law of Christ, and we are not promised that we will receive a throne. There will reign in some earthly kingdom. This is for Solomon. But what you can take from this, or the application we can take today, is if you want to please God, this is how you do it.
Mhm.
Exactly. It's not about checking the boxes. It's about, are you earnestly seeking after God? Do you truly want this type of life for yourself? Do you truly want to have a relationship with your Creator? Do you truly want to please Him in your heart? Is that your motivation for doing these things? Is it born out of your love for God, or are you doing it out of compulsion?
Yeah. There are some folks who do things. Well, I checked it off, therefore.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this lifestyle is deeper than just surface level actions.
And you could say that, emphasizing that point that he's charging him with this, that there is that expectation that there are, how I put it a while ago, there are real life implications to it. Just like what we were saying with regard to those statistics and stuff. If David's saying, if you want to be statistically successful in your reign or in your relationship with God, you need to follow in my ways. You need to heed the advice that I'm telling you, the wisdom that I'm trying to impart to you.
I think it's important to note that David's not saying this will be easy.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to take some effort.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to making some right choices and dedicating yourself to it for the right reasons. So he says in verse 2, I go the way of all the earth. Now, before we get into the rest of what he says, I think it's important to point out that what he is pointing out here to Solomon is, my time is coming, and this time comes to all men. It is appointed unto men once to die, after this the judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody is immortal. Nobody will live forever.
Mm-hmm.
This is natural. If you live long enough, you will die. Mm-hmm. So prioritize things correctly. Because this is a time that comes to all, what do we need to do?
Yeah, I'm sure that, and even this, though this was recorded, I'm sure what's going through David's mind is replaying his life, all the things that have happened to him, all the things that he has done, on the mistakes that he's made, the things that he has gotten right, and wanting, not wanting, well, depending on the outcome, how it went, wanting those things for your children or not wanting them. There's a lot of things that he's wanting to pass on to them. But I would say that, obviously I've never been in this position, but I can imagine, just looking back at how I can relate my own childhood and my years as a parent myself, not wanting things for my children and wanting them to come up and have a different life than I have had, not have to figure out the things that I figured out the hard way, hoping that they can learn from my mistakes. That's something that I would earnestly and from my heart want to pass on to them or prevent them from having to go through. And so I can imagine David being a lot in the same way, perhaps thinking some of those things as well at this particular time.
I will say that children seem to want to learn the hard way. My wife and we are at the point where our kids, the youngest one is 20, and we're looking at them and we see the path that they're going and we see the possible problems, and we tell them, and they just don't listen. They're like, so I just want, and then they go through it and they're like, I wish I'd have listened to you, which kind of makes me think of, the people I know. There are some people that I love very, very, very much who always say, I have zero regrets. And the mentality is, if I made any other choices, I wouldn't be who I am. And my question is typically, but wouldn't it be nice to not have not had to have lived through a certain thing
Mhm.
and still learn that lesson and be the person you are. It's like, I don't see how you can live a life without regrets, because there's definitely things I wish I'd have done a little bit different. There were lessons I wish I would have listened to.
Mhm.
And out of some of those lessons, I'm sure there were consequences that there's consequences you knew about, and there may have been consequences that you didn't know about as
Yeah.
well. And sometimes people don't count those consequences that others may see or others may get an impression of you, and those consequences can be serious.
Yeah.
You
So go-
definitely get a better appreciation for some of those hard lessons. You know, even though they may hurt, it sticks with you longer. Anyways, that's kind of getting off track.
So he says, I go all the way, I go the way of all the earth. So what does he say? Well, the therefore is in that, but it says, be thou strong, therefore. So therefore, whenever you see that word therefore, you want to stop and see what it's there for. He's saying, because I go all the way of the earth, this is the advice I have for you. Be thou strong. Now, when you think about the world's idea of strong, they seem to automatically associate anything strength related as toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And they are anti-strength. And they actually act like a weak man is a strong man.
Mm-hmm.
And they have it kind of backwards.
Yeah. I would say that, you know, first and foremost, we weren't created in the image of the world. We were created in the image of God. And he did have expectations for us. And from the beginning, you know, when Adam and Eve were in the garden, and even after, he wanted men and women to be the way that he created them in, you know. So I think being strong is standing up and assuming those roles and rejecting childish things, putting away, you know, the worldly pleasures that you could seek after, but instead assuming the relationship and the role that God gave you.
The Hebrew word that is translated strong means to prevail, be courageous, be resolute, be firm, withstand.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So that is true strength. When the world is telling you something different, you have to withstand it. You have to stand firm. You have to be resolute. You have to be courageous. And you have to prevail against many, many things. So men are called to be strong. And because, well, one of the things that David's saying is, because I'm dying, I can't be this for you anymore.
Yeah.
You have to take my place for my grandchildren, for my great grandchildren. And not only for that, you think about, I mean, I have a small responsibility in comparison, because I just have to be strong for my immediate family. I'm not a king,
Mm-hmm.
but David led a nation of God's people. So he's saying to Solomon, ultimately, you have to be this, not just for your children, but for the nation, and not just for the nation of Israel, because one of the roles of Israel was to be a light to the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
They're supposed to be an example to the rest of the world. They're supposed to represent God to the world. That's a huge responsibility, and that takes a lot of strength.
Yeah, and there's and you know, and I may be way off topic here, so help me out if I am. But you know, there was a promise given to Abraham, and that promise, we've been studying the book of Abraham, and we see the strength that Abraham showed, this same kind of strength that you're talking about here, and how he made sure that his children were set up and headed in the right direction. Well, I mean, this seed goes right through David, right? So would David not have known and understood that promise that was given to Abraham, and would some of that burden not be on him to make sure that his family and his line, because the seed is going to come through David, right?
Yep, that's right, exactly right.
So, I mean, just on top of that, I feel like that's a very important thing. Not only is he doing it for the love of his children, but I mean, there's some things that have to come out here, and his children have to carry this out, and he's not going to no longer be here to help them with that.
But he has done what he could to give Solomon the best foundation he could give.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, what Solomon does with it, that's up to Solomon.
And, you know, thinking about that, he's passed on the biggest thing he could ever pass on to him, right? I mean, we think about the things, you know, again, my mind always goes to earthly things, right? We always look at, okay, I'm going to set up a big bank account for my children. I'm going to have this good retirement. I'm going to have all these earthly things. I'm going to make sure my kids get my land when I retire. You make all these plans, but are we really passing on the faith? You know, we talk about the system of faith, and are we sharing the gospel, and are we bringing up godly children? That's the most important inheritance that we can give to our children today.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that, but now I'm kind of thinking, what kind of legacy do a lot of parents leave to their children? When I meet people out in the world, a lot of times you'll see that they had they love football because they watch football with their dads, or baseball or basketball or whatever.
Those memories, yeah.
They pass that on. Like, what are we passing to our children? Are we passing that level of zeal for the Word of God, or is that just for sports or cars or hunting or whatever it might be?
Yeah, we prioritize the earthly things over the spiritual matters. That's exactly right. And so if we can spend time and learn from David here, and like you said, really dive into what David's saying here, be strong, and the things that he's passing down to his sons and preparing them for, it's a huge influence, should be a huge influence on our lives and the kind of fathers that we want to be, or that we should be. We should be striving to be.
It would be nice that at my funeral, when people talk about me after I'm gone, what is the first thing that pops into your head about Michael? He was a Christian. Wouldn't that be great? His love for the Lord.
Yeah.
Zeal. Led and dictated his life.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing that I try to impart on my kids is that this world, I try to make sure that they know that this world is temporary, and that we will all pass on from it at some point, and that we all will be on the other side of eternity. And the choices that we make now will define where we are then. And I always tell them that someday when we are on the other side, I don't want 6 of us in paradise and 1 of us not there. I said, I tell them straight to them. I said, I want to be there with you on the other side. I want all of us to be there together on the other side. So I try to make sure they understand the gravity of the situation, or of the situation now. Their circumstances now, the choices that they make now will help make that a reality in the time to come.
I'm sitting here looking at this, be strong, therefore, and I know we're getting ready to read the rest of the verse, but how many men out there, I've even thought about it myself, but how many men out there have said this very thing to their son? Get up and be a man. You'll be all right. But again, they're given this earthly understanding of what that means. And this verse, the more I sit here and study of it, we've studied it now for a week or so. I've been kind of looking at this verse, and just today I'm pulling out new things in my head, new thoughts. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah. When a father says, get up and be a man, well, what is his idea of a man? Like, what did you put before him? And
the other question is he being a man?
Yeah.
Whenever you make this statement, we know David was the man, right? A man after God's own heart. We know David can say this statement to his son, get up and be a man. But like you said, and I have to ask the question today, if I was to tell my son, get up and be a man, am I setting that example for him?
There's a lot of people, a lot of young men in today's world that have reached adulthood, and they have no idea what a man is. They don't know how to be a man themselves, because they're like I said earlier, they're deer in headlights. They've never been given that instruction. They are fumbling around and trying to figure it out for themselves.
And just like we talked about earlier, if that instruction is not there, it's going to be filled with somebody. Somebody's going to teach them how to be a man. And it's more than likely not going to be the right teaching.
Well, this could go off topic real quick if we let it, but there was a question that was put forth a year or two ago. What is a woman? And you watch some of those videos, like nobody can answer it. You can do that same thing for a man. What is a man? And people would say, I don't know what a man is, or they'll get some weird variation.
Let's make a new documentary.
Let's make it. What is a man? Well, I mean, if you can't answer that question, if you as a parent haven't taught your children what a man is, they're going to be like, I don't know.
Well, and even still, I mean, a lot of, and probably within the church too, a lot of the things that people would come up with would be from a worldly perspective, worldly standard, and that's what we've got to get away from and emphasize. What does God expect from us? What does it mean to be a man before God?
Well, if I listen to the world and their definition of man, I wouldn't want to be a man either, because
Yeah.
it doesn't sound good, and it's not very popular. So, but what is God's definition of a man?
That's what's the most important, right? The most important. So it says,
Yeah.
be strong, therefore, and prove yourself a man.
Yeah, and I think that just lends to that it being a lifestyle. The proof is in the pudding. Actions speak louder than words. However you would want to put it. What are you doing to be a man?
Yeah, your children should be able to look and say, "Now, there's a man. That's a man."
Well, and one of the worst quotes that I can think of today that sticks out to me is, "Don't do as I." What is it? How is it? I'm butchering it now. Don't do as I do. Do as I say.
No,
Yeah.
do as I say, not as
Not as I do. Yeah, that's what my
Yeah.
dad used to say all the time. Do as I say, not as I do.
Right. And you know what I mean? That is, if you think about that, that's just a horrible way.
Yeah.
You're telling someone to do something, then you're standing back, not even following your own
You just
rules.
badmouth my dad.
No, that was you. I would never.
He used to
badmouth
say
your
that
dad.
all the time.
Well,
But-
I've heard it too.
Yeah.
I've heard it all my life. Don't do as I do. Do as I say.
Do as I
You
say,
used to
yeah.
heard it maybe backwards, but it was kind of the same
Yeah.
deal there. But
I heard the Yank version.
the Yank version.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're getting you over to the Okie version.
Yeah, but he's telling him, you've got to do this. You've got to live this life. And when he's about to, that thought transitions into verse 3 about what you need to do. But you need to make it important in your life. You need to make your relationship with God important to you first and foremost in your life, and that needs to direct your life, your actions, your decisions, your behaviors, everything need to stem from your relationship with God.
Well, the King James version translates that word "prove" as "show." Show thyself a man.
Okay.
So you have to. They're both fine. They're both
Yeah.
good. But the idea there is you have to present yourself as being a man. As a man, you need to present as a man, and there's responsibility with that. And I forgot what I was going to say, but anyways, there's an expectation there that you have to act a certain way,
Mhm.
do certain things, and present as a man. It's very clear, very obvious what you should be. There's a great responsibility with that. And of course, the Hebrew word that's translated man, it's translated several times as man, but also there's a couple times where it's translated as a champion or worthy. So there's an idea of you have to be worthy and you have to be a champion as a man. That's one of your responsibilities, one of your roles,
Absolutely.
is to be kind of like a warrior.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, a man is a protector for his family, and I thought about that as we were going through all those statistics. That a man protects his children from those things. He doesn't allow them to get mixed up into it. He doesn't allow those kinds of things to come in his home. So he acts as a shield or a barrier between those things. And so you could look at him that way as a protector for his family.
I remember what I was going to say. I was going to say you shouldn't be ashamed of it. Don't be ashamed of being a man, because the world shames you. If you're a man, they act like that's the worst thing you could possibly be. Don't be ashamed of it.
Yeah, I mean, you should have a certain sense of pride in being a man, not a pride born from arrogance,
Not a
obviously,
sinful pride,
but
yeah.
of being proud of finding value in it, of being able to stand up and say no to the world, or no to the wide or wild perspectives of society today, societal perspectives or whatever, to be able to stand up and boldly say no.
You could make an argument that the reason why the world is as bad as it is, especially in the United States of America, is because real men wouldn't stand up and say, no, that's not right.
Yeah.
They stayed silent.
As far as biblical men go, you could look at the life of Christ when he started his ministry. How many times did he boldly get up and say, no, this is not right. What you are doing is not right, you know?
Well, and I think that comes again more from the worldly view of what we do. We don't want to offend nobody, right?
Yeah.
And so those things, like you're talking about, the call to strong men was not just the men being spiritual leaders, in the family, but we also need men to be spiritual leaders in the church.
Mhm.
And so when you allow the idea of, well, we don't want to say anything because we don't want to offend anybody, that's a dangerous concept that is creeping into the church. And I think we see it more and more, that men are afraid to speak up because we don't want to offend. And I know that's it's a hard thing to balance, right? Because we don't want to offend anybody. We want to do it in love, and we want to stay
Yeah.
within the scripture, but
Sometimes the truth is hard.
it is.
It's hard to hear.
But
and
are
it's
we a
hard to
man?
give.
Are we a man like the world, or are we a man like David? You know what I mean? David is
Yeah.
humble enough, like you said earlier, whenever he is called out and knows that he's done something wrong, he always turns back to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be willing to do that same thing when we are corrected. We all need correction at times in our lives. And so when we're corrected, we need to be humble, and we need to, walk ourselves back to the Lord and
Some
be
people
more like David.
Some people might call it semantics, but I don't think that speaking the truth is offensive. But that doesn't stop people from being offended by the truth.
That's exactly true. Yeah. The problem is the truth shouldn't be offensive, but the world teaches today that it is.
Yeah. Well, people are offended by anything and everything.
Yeah.
And if you speak out against something, people are offended. If you stay silent, people are offended.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. People are going to find offense because they want to find offense.
Mhm.
So if people are going to be mad at you anyways, might as well speak the truth.
Well, and like you said, we've seen Jesus, we've seen the apostles. They were out spreading the gospel. They were speaking to those people in the synagogue. They were reasoning from the scriptures, and they were not worried about offending people using the truth.
But the key is you do it in love, like you said earlier. You have to do it in love. You don't go out there to say things just to try to upset people.
You're saying it to try to bring them back to the truth, right?
You're not doing it in a condemning way. You're doing it in hopes that they will repent, in hopes that they will come to a better knowledge of the truth.
Well, and we talked about that in our last one, right? Judge not, lest you be judged. Yeah. And we talked about how we're not, by correcting someone, it's not condemning someone. You're actually correcting them in a way to bring them back to the truth. We're not condemning them.
And also, things that we said in the 80s and 90s that were generally understood as just the truth. It's like biology. A man is this and a woman is that, biologically speaking. Mm-hmm. That was not offensive the whole time I was growing up. Mm-hmm. And now you'll get all kinds of...
And in fact, it was the opposite. To say otherwise, you would have been the
odd man out. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
lost his marbles.
So a lot of times, people are going to find offense, but
sure. So verse 2 there, it says, "I go the way of all the earth. Be strong, therefore, and prove yourself a man." And then moving on to verse 3, it says, "And keep the charge of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, his judgments, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do wherever you turn." And so that's kind of a long verse. I'm going to pop back there to the start of verse 3, and we can kind of break that down and talk on that a little bit. So what's your thoughts on that one?
Mine specifically, or you have any thoughts before I?
Well, I do have some thoughts, but you can go first.
Okay. Well, my first thought was just the word keep. I typically, when I'm studying these verses, I will look at the individual words. I'll read through it. We talked about how to study the Bible not too long ago, or reading and studying. Mm-hmm. When I'm preparing for a lesson, I will read the lesson casually a couple times, and then I'll start diving into the actual words. What do the words mean? So when you look at this word and keep, that means to guard or to observe or to give heed. So you protect it, but you also do it. Mm-hmm. And so there's a responsibility that David is placing on the shoulders of Solomon, saying, you need to actively protect these things, and you need to observe them and do them. And then he gives the list. So there is a responsibility. And I would also point out that this is a promise specifically to Solomon when you get down the last part, as is written in the law of Moses, that thou mayest prosper in all that thou doest. Now, when you look at the promise for Solomon, it's talking about if you want to be successful as a king of Israel and and in general, this is what you have to do. How do we apply that to ourselves in a modern time where we're not under the law of Moses? Well, if you want to be pleasing to God, and if you want to have a blessed life, a life that has a measure of peace that comes from only from the Lord, not saying that you'll have an easy life when it comes to the world, you'll still have persecutions, but if you want to be pleasing to God and have the peace that comes with being a child of God, this is what God expects of his children.
Yeah, my comment on this was going to be, to start out, was that this really is an equation for life. And while this is written to Solomon and in the context of Solomon's time, the underlying principles are still the same for us. And it's an equation for life, that if you do these things, then the outcome will be that you will prosper in all that you do. Now, I'm not saying that we'll prosper in this life. We're not guaranteed an easy life. We're guaranteed, that those times of trials will come. But the basic equation is that if we seek after God from our heart, if we seek to please him in all that we do, if we seek to have a relationship with him, if we submit to him and in his will, then the outcome will be, every time, we will find his favor and he will take us home someday.
So this is not saying that if I follow these that I'll have a nice big house, 100 acres, a fancy car,
and 50 cows.
50
That's
cows.
not what it's saying.
It's not okay.
But the underlying, I think this, correct me if I'm off base here, but I think the underlying principle is that, if we earnestly seek after God from our heart, then he will be pleased with us. We will find favor with him, and he will have a home waiting for us in heaven someday.
I think that's correct. I think that's right.
And that's what ultimately matters the most, right?
Yeah. I should have gone first, because mine's not as deep as Michael's comments were.
Oh.
I'll remember that for next time.
Well, it's coming up, because it says, keep the charge of the Lord thy God. What does that mean when talking about the charge? Because this is a charge. There was a charge laid to Joshua. There was a charge laid to Moses. They were similar in nature. Follow me, don't turn to the left, don't turn to the right, kind of thing. And he's placing that same charge to Solomon. What is the charge?
Well, I think it finishes out there in the verse there, doesn't it? I mean, partially, but
it does, yeah. But,
but you're asking the question, right?
yeah, I'm asking the question. I know the answer. I got the answer book right here. Well, the charge of the Lord thy God, and he's going to keep going. Like, you have to do these things.
Right.
And again, that the idea of a charge is not a suggestion. If you want to be pleasing in the eyes of God, you have to make application of God's standards to your life, not an application of your standards to God. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, you have obligations to fulfill. There is an expectation of obedience. There is a list of things that you have to do. It's the why behind the what is what then becomes more important. Why are you keeping his statutes? Why are you keeping his commandments? Why are you keeping his judgments, or why do you observe his judgments?
And I think it's something interesting to point out, Michael, and this may be, but again, you brought it up in the sermon that you had preached. It tells us to keep the charge of the Lord your God. And ultimately, we know that he is our God, whether we follow him or not. Whether we choose to do these things, whether or not, Solomon chose to do these things, he's still our God. And those rules still apply to us, whether or not we follow them or not.
Yeah, on the day of judgment, the same books will be open.
Yeah.
And whether you believe in God or not, that's not going to change the judge for you. So he is our creator, whether we honor him or not.
Mm-hmm. So it says, charge of the Lord your God to walk in his ways. Do we want to spend some time on that? What does it mean to walk in his ways?
You want to do that one, or you want me to do it?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, when you think about to walk in his ways, how do you get from point A to point B nowadays?
Well, it's several ways. We could walk, we could drive, we could multiple ways.
Bicycle. Well, they didn't have-
Bicycle. We
they
can
didn't have all
run.
those ways back
Prefer
then.
not to run if I
And-
don't have
and
to. but-
Israel wasn't supposed to have chariots and horses, so they're typically supposed to walk from point A to point B. So when you go from a journey, when you're like, okay, I'm going to go from here, I'm going to go to there. It's a walk, it's a journey, it's a path that you take. How do you get from Bethlehem to Jerusalem? There might be a different path. Some paths might be easier, but people understand. Like if I want to get to Jerusalem, I have to walk this path.
Mhm.
If you want to get from here to heaven, see, it's different. There might be different paths from here to Norman. You could take 10 different ways if you want to, but there's only one path to heaven. And what is that path? You have to walk that path, which means you have to journey down that road. You have to live in a certain way that is pleasing to God. So that's walking the path. How you live your life is walking the path. What you do, what you don't do is that path. And what are the ways that he's
I think
talking
you
about?
could also say that it explicitly excludes all the other paths, all those other things, all those other ways you could go, all those other things you could do. You've got to make sure that you're not on those paths.
Yeah, there are countless paths to hell. There's only one way to
Mhm.
to heaven.
And I think that's important because it says walk in his way or
Yeah.
his path. That
Mhm.
means, like you said, there are other paths out there, and we have to make sure we're on the right path.
Yep.
There's not more than one way to get there, right? There's only
Correct.
one way, and it's
Yep,
his way.
His way.
Mhm.
And we can't commandeer his way and say we're going to change it.
And just some notes I took from your sermon. I don't want to spend a lot of time on them, but I think it's important that we state the fact that there are people who think that they've done things so bad in their lives that they can't walk that path anymore. And like I said, I don't want to go too far on that, but you put down to, sometimes it's baby steps. You have to start slow. You have to ease into it sometimes. And also you put down to start where we are. Don't worry about where we came from. Don't worry about how we got where we're at. Let's just start somewhere. Let's don't use an excuse that we can't start where we are.
Yeah. Well, we could spend a lot of time on that, but I think about some folks when I started preaching, fresh out of school, every new preacher is zealous, and they go to a congregation. They're expecting everyone to be kind of at the same level as they are. And I've met people who were Christians longer than I'd been alive that knew very little about the Word of God. Should we say, well, I've spent 40 years in the church and I don't know as much as I should, so I'm just going to I'm just going to stay ignorant?
No.
I don't want these little kids to show me up that they know more than me. It doesn't matter. If you've been a Christian for 5 minutes or 50 years, start walking towards the Lord. And, sometimes it's baby steps. When you first learn to walk, kids, as far as I know, don't come out of the womb sprinting. They just lay there.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally they might roll over. Then they start trying to sit up and rock up, and then they'll start crawling, and then they'll take little steps. It's a long, hard journey for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
And people too often they think, well, I've been a Christian for a year. I feel like I should be farther along. As long as you've made progress,
Sure.
keep going, keep moving.
Yeah, just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, eventually, before you know it, you'll be running.
Yeah. So, like I said, I don't want to get us too far off track, but I think those are good points that you brought up in your sermon that I just wanted to throw out there. So
I only
continue
had
on.
2 good points in the whole
So
sermon.
far, just two.
Okay.
So far, just two.
I'll try to do better next time.
To walk in his ways, to keep his statutes. So, you guys good with the? Have we said everything we want to say about walking in his ways?
Yeah, I think so.
What about to keep his statutes? It really says to keep his statutes, his commandments.
Yeah, so he did give the law to the Jews, to the Hebrews, to bring them to righteousness, to teach them what righteousness was, to lay out what his expectations were for them. If they were going to be in a relationship with him, there were certain expectations, obligations that they had to observe. And so they didn't get to go out and just live whatever kind of life they wanted to. They needed to live a holy life. They needed to set themselves apart from the world and to act like a people worthy of his calling,
So we know this context again was written from, David wrote this to his sons. But if we were to try to make application from that today, how would we do that?
You would just follow the laws of Christ, follow the teachings and instructions of the apostles that were written for us.
Mm-hmm.
And
most of those commandments, the essence of it was recaptured in the teachings of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Those things, it was a black and white list that stemmed from God's nature. If we want to be like God, if we want to live, if we want to know what true righteousness is, we have to look at Him. So if you then make a list of, it's against God's nature to murder people. So thou shalt not murder. Yeah, that's a black and white command, but it comes from an underlying thing that either pleases or displeases God. So as Christians, we seek to do the things that please our Lord and our God. We seek to do the things that He wants us to do, to live in the ways that He expects us to live, and the things that are consistent with what pleases Him, and to also stray away from the things that displease Him.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as far as Christians today, you can look at it from that perspective of, are we doing the things that God wants us to do?
Right. Yeah. So go ahead.
Well, someone might wonder what's the difference between statutes, commandments, and judgments? Because you can make the argument that they're similar,
mm-hmm.
but they are different. I don't want to spend a lot of time in them because we're not under the law of Moses. And to kind of go along with what Justin said, when you look at the 10 commandments, 9 out of the 10 commandments are moral laws that have always been in place.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the garden before the law of Moses, it was always wrong to murder. The only one that's not a moral command in the 10 commandments was to keep the Sabbath. That's not a moral law. That's something different. But when you think about the statutes and commandments, what's the big difference? Well, commandments are like the 10 commandments. They're more than 10 commandments, by the way. Just people kind of get hung up on the 10.
Locked up on the 10, don't we? Yeah.
But statutes are more along the lines of regulatory how-tos. How do you keep the commandments? How do you keep the laws? And then the commandments, that one's pretty simple. And judgments are basically God's cause or His justice, kind of fall in line with, well, this is what God says, this is how He determines it, and you just fall in line with his justice, His cause. Then of course His testimonies, and that's fairly simple. Just listen to His witness. You look at for Solomon, in some sense you could say, well, he needs to listen to the prophets, to the ones sent to him to tell him stuff. But and he says, as it is written in the law of Moses. He was supposed to follow the law of Moses.
Yeah,
we're supposed to follow the law of Christ.
Absolutely.
So we stick with the moral laws that have never changed and are reiterated in New Testament scripture.
And then, of course, we touched pretty heavily, I think, earlier on that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you turn. I think we kind of talked about that earlier, didn't we? Mm-hmm. Obviously, being spoken to Solomon. But
the only thing I would add to that is it shows that with him saying, whithersoever thou turnest thyself, he says you're responsible for where you go.
Mm-hmm. And
if you go in the right places, then you'll prosper.
Sure. Okay. And then verse 4 there, it says, are we good with that? Verse 3?
Yes.
You guys good with that?
Yeah.
Verse 4 says, that the Lord may fulfill His word, which He spoke concerning me, saying, if your sons take heed to their way, to walk before me in truth with all their heart and with all their soul. Now that is quite the ring.
Sorry. That was my alarm.
That's pretty good. So it says there, before me in truth with all their heart and with all their soul, He said, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. And so we can spend a little bit of time there in verse 4, covering verse 4 if you want to.
Well, we could go back to 2 Samuel where we were looking at this morning. And that's where God made the promise to David, if I remember right, saying that as long as you do these certain things, you will be the king of Israel, and your children will reign after you. Your throne will be established forever. And a lot of people will look to that and totally ignore the fact that the sum of thy word is truth.
Mm-hmm.
That although a condition might not be obvious there, God places conditions before and after that.
Mm-hmm.
So you notice here that the Lord may continue his word, which he spake concerning me, saying, he's basically saying, as long as you follow God, you will be king of Israel. As long as your children, your son after you follows God, he will stay over Israel, and so on and so forth. Of course, hindsight, we know that the kingdom was split right after Solomon died. But it is conditional. He says, if thy children, if they do this as well, if you do this, if they do this, if they take heed to their way to walk before me in truth. So walk before God, to be in the presence of God, to be face to face in a sense with God. If you do this, then there shall not fail thee a man on the throne. But he says, if thy children take heed to their way. So now what does that mean? Because before it says his way is in God's way. This time it says their way.
Well, it obviously gives us, there's a difference, right?
Well, here he's basically pointing out that their way needs to be God's way.
Mm-hmm.
As long as their way lines up with God's way, they'll be fine.
Well, and I think the important part of that verse, and I don't know if we're ready to get there yet, but it says before me in truth. And so, I mean, to me, I see that there is a truth, which would mean what in the opposite?
Well, that means that there's something that is untrue.
Right. So if their ways don't line up with God's ways, would it be not truth, right? They would be following God's ways. And so I think that kind of ties together there. And then there's God's truth, and then there's an earthly truth, right? The way men look at it today. We look at our ways may not be the ways of the Lord.
I think it's important that it couples that also. You need to do it in truth, but you need to do it with all their heart. In this context, with all their heart and with all of their soul. And this needs to be in them and through them. It needs to be them. This is how they need to define themselves. They need to do it out of their reverence for God.
Yeah, and I'll pull a Michael line here. So if it says with all their heart and all their soul, what does that leave out?
Nothing.
I like that. I steal that one from you, Mike.
That's all right. I probably stole it from someone else. I don't know.
So basically, give everything you have, right?
Yeah.
Give everything you have to make sure that you're doing it God's way.
Well, can we look back at truth for a moment?
Sure. Yeah.
And then I want to like to look at that heart and soul again.
Absolutely.
I was just thinking one of the phrases you hear all the time is, that's not my truth. And they'll say, well, that's your truth. That's their truth. Like everybody has a truth.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of wondering, does the world not know what truth is? Do they think that truth is opinion or subject to opinion? They don't seem to realize that there is something that is true. There is something that is right. There's something that is wrong. And opinion is not at the same level as truth. And a lot of times when I hear people say, well, that's not my truth, they're saying, well, that's not your opinion, or that's not your life experience.
Right.
And that's something completely different than the truth.
They may be misusing that, misapplying that word.
Yeah.
Truth versus opinion.
That's exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, and opinion is really something that's just based off of, it's really not based off of facts, right?
No, it's a preference.
Right. It's a preference. I mean, my opinion on, whatever food you like to eat, pecans, for instance, my opinion that pecans are great in just about any dessert.
Hey, I think the pecans are great in the garbage can.
So there you go. And Justin, I don't know where he stands on this, but
well, I'm with the truth, with your
with the truth. Okay. Yeah. I like
with the truth.
The truth.
Are good in desserts.
I like it.
I look at these 3 microphones and all of them are different. Why is that?
It's because we all got a different opinion on which microphone we want to use.
I like this one because it looks kind of retro and it looks cool.
That's a matter of opinion, right?
That's a matter of opinion. Yeah, some people might not like that.
But I think that's the whole point, right? Your opinion is something that it's really hard to prove one way or another,
you
whether your
can't prove
opinion
it.
is.
It's a
Yeah.
preference.
And truth should be something you should be able to prove.
Truth is something absolutely you can prove.
Mhm.
Colors, I think, my Yeti mug here is blue. Somebody might say it's a different something or other, but you can take a tester and you can get the numbers off this. Like if I want to paint my wall this color, I can take it to Home Depot and scan it, and they'll get some numbers out of that. And they'll say, okay, this is what this color is. Like that's what it is. Like
Right.
we can name it whatever we want to, but it doesn't change the
Calling it a
foundation.
different name doesn't change it.
Yeah, it doesn't
Right.
doesn't change what it is.
Right. Which we could take that back to the man and the woman thing as well, right? We don't want to go back
Absolutely.
there,
You
but
can call it
there
whatever
is a
you want
truth.
to. It doesn't change what it is.
Absolutely.
You can mutilate words, and that's what they've done. They've redefined words
Mhm.
to make it mean something else. To say, well, look, this is what it is. Like it doesn't change what it is.
Mhm.
So there is an objective truth, and truth is not subject to opinion. So people should understand that. I wish we would, and we could get a common ground.
Mhm.
And just because they reject the truth doesn't mean that it's not true.
Yeah.
Okay, you can reject the truth. Sure, you can do that, but it doesn't make it any less the truth.
One of my favorite kid movies that I've watched with the kids, there's a movie, I don't remember the name of it. I don't know why I can't remember the name of it, but the whole thing is people are not believing in like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny anymore. So they're fading away and becoming invisible, and they're going to eventually disappear. And the whole point is like Jack Frost, who everyone forgot about. Nobody believed him. He's the savior. He's going to come back and get people to believe in them again so they can become real again or more substantial again. It's like real. Well, truth doesn't really work that way. Like it doesn't matter how hard you believe something. It doesn't matter how sincere you believe. Your belief is not what makes it true.
Mhm.
Like there are people out there who absolutely do not believe in God. Does that affect his existence at all? Absolutely not. He exists whether they believe in him or not. And how much belief I have in God doesn't make him more real. Like our belief should be based on something real, but our belief doesn't make something true.
Mhm.
So you need to calibrate your beliefs with the word of God.
Yeah, absolutely. What else you got for this?
Well, just with all their heart and with all their soul, heart, but your heart and your soul are not necessarily the same things. When you think about heart, a lot of times in scripture, it's talking about your inner man,
Mhm.
that person that makes you. When you think about mankind, a lot of times we seem to think that we have a body and a soul inhabits it. I think this is who we are, and there's a soul somewhere in there. But in reality, we're a soul that has a body, and this body is temporary.
Mhm.
That soul is what makes us who we are. That soul, that's what's going to go to heaven or hell.
Yeah.
That soul is what's going to go on beyond this. So he is appealing to the inner man. Their inner person. The world sees your body. They don't see your soul. They don't see your heart. They don't see the inner man. They might see the fruit of it, but
So if we can say the fruit can come out at times. Yeah.
But
yeah.
So he's saying this needs to be so deep in your core being that it affects the inner man.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you talk about the soul, this is talking about your breath, your life, which still is your soul, your inner man, but it's what makes your body you move. Without the soul, we're just a lump of flesh. So this is very deep. Your very core person. Your core person, that's what's going to move on, either to heaven or hell. The thing that desires all these physical, fleshly pleasures in life, that stays here. So it's important to, I guess you could say, feed the right wolf.
Well, and something else I want to add to something we kind of skipped over because I didn't want to chase squirrels, but up there earlier it says, if your sons take heed. What does that if mean?
Well, it's a conditional statement.
Right. I just wanted to throw that out because we did do a lesson on the Brian lens a few months ago roughly about, whether we have a choice or not, whether we have free will. And it seems like, David was the forefront of some of that lesson about David talking about possibly, people taken out of context saying that he was born in sin. And we have David here actually teaching his sons that if your sons. So that conditional statement tells me that we have a choice.
We absolutely have a choice.
And I don't want to go off on a chase in that, but that's another note that I had over here.
So what's this Berean lens and where can I watch it?
Are you trying to shut things down here, Michael? Well, in all seriousness, I mean, like I said, I think we've covered. We've seen that David is a perfect example of what a godly father would look like. And again, these things were written to Solomon. These things were written to his sons. We can take lesson from this in the way that we are fathers, and that's what this whole lesson was all brought about, right? To bring this thing to a whole close here.
This should have been a summation of David's life. All of these things Solomon should have already witnessed in his father's life. This should have brought it all home and brought it together for him.
Yep.
But that's important for us as fathers today. And we kind of mentioned that earlier. We need to start with them early, and we need to show them the ways of the Lord. Show them what it means to be a godly man in an ungodly world today.
Right. And so we've said these things, and we've shown from the Old Testament an example of David. And we know that we don't go to the Old Testament for our necessarily our biblical teachings. We learn from it, right? Mm-hmm. But we like to point toward the New Testament as well. And so if I were to go to the New Testament, we can find multiple passages that call out fathers to be, strong spiritual leaders. But one that I want to share here that we had talked about earlier is Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. And it says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." And so not only can we go to the Old Testament, find an example of a biblical and a godly father, but we know that the New Testament over and over tells us that we are to lead our family, especially when it comes to spiritual matters. We're supposed to be protectors, of our children and of our wives, but we're also supposed to be teaching them about God.
Yeah, setting that tone for their relationship with God. That it starts, like you were just talking about, Michael. That it starts in your heart. It starts in within you, and that needs to be consistent with the way that you're living your life.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I've got it scrolling across the bottom there again. Why are godly fathers important? I think we've answered that question. I think the statistics we talked about earlier really speak for themselves. But again, those stats are mainly off of just fatherless home. It's not taking in the fact of whether or not that be a Christian father or not. So the stats alone talk for themselves. But I think we've seen an example here of David being a good godly father, and the fact that the New Testament calls us to do the same. And so that's my challenge for those that may be listening that may have been set through this hour and 12-minute show here, which has been great. It's been a good show. But my challenge to the fathers and the men out there, not even if you're not a father, just the men out there in the world. The world again tells us that being a man is toxic, being strong man. And of course, we just proved what a strong man is. And so I'm not looking for that earthly understanding of a strong man. But my call is to you guys to step up. Be men, just like David told Solomon to be a man. That's my call, and that challenge is for me too, to be a man, to be an example for my children and for my wife, because we are called to lead, and we need strong men out there, biblical, strong, godly men to lead.
Find purpose in it.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, to find purpose in it, to make that your mission in life, to recognize that obligation that you have, and to take it seriously. You say, you know what, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to be a man of God.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, this says, fathers, do not provoke your children. And I understand I don't want to take things out of context, but, uncles, we've bbeen doing a study on Genesis. I keep bringing that up, and how Ishmael was the uncle to Esau and Jacob. And we talked about the possibility that there could have been some influence. And so even if you're not a father, you can still be an uncle or a cousin, or it can be multiple different things, right? You can still influence. Godly men can influence others just as much as they do their own. right? I mean, I know there's a lot of men in my life. My dad influenced me in a huge way, but there are other men that have been in my life that have influenced me, and it's important for us to be a good influence on others as well, not just as a father, but mostly fathers. That's where we're kind of shooting for today. So, what else? You guys got anything else?
Well, I got two things.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say at one point, my youngest is 20 years old, so it's too late for me. The mistakes are done. But that doesn't mean I can't continue to be an example. But also, my son, his wife is about ready to give birth. She's going to pop in like next 3 weeks or so, give or take. So I can, as you were saying, be that example and fortify that example that Gabriel's supposed to be for his son. I can do that for him as well.
I can personally attest to the influence that a grandfather has over his grandsons. Because my grandfather was one of my heroes in life, and I, aspired to be a man like him. And I can't wait to be there's a few things that I wanted in life, and one of those things was I can't wait to be a grandfather to my grandchildren like he was to me. So he definitely left a positive impact on my life.
Mm-hmm. You said you had two things.
The second one was basically just a summation of 1 Kings chapter 2 and saying what does a godly father look like? Well, you can see just in those few verses that we looked at, a godly father prioritizes God over everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And if you prioritize God because of God's priorities, everything else falls into place. You can see that a godly father doesn't stay silent, but he guides and directs his children and his children's children. Mm-hmm. And you can see that there is discipline that comes with being a godly father. And you could probably pick out more, but those are the three things that I was thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Justin, you got anything final that you'd like to add to the thought process?
I think
I'm good.
Spoken my mind. So
I was wondering if, as a father, is it true that the grayer you are, the wiser you are?
Not sure about that one. So I would like to throw out there again a plug for our Facebook and YouTube. Really, really appreciate it if you guys would like and share. Am I forgetting anything there? Lindsay had told me last week, you got to remember to say this, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but like, subscribe, share, all those things. Reach out to us if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have a topic that you're interested in. Maybe we've said something today that spurs a thought in your mind, and you're saying, hey, I've always wondered about, this. Please reach out to us, because we're always looking for topics that the audience may want us to study on. And so we're always looking for that. Does anybody have a challenge for us?
I have a challenge.
What kind of challenge you got?
I double dog dare you to search the scriptures daily and to prove all things. That's a challenge.
That's a challenge. Okay.
Challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted. So again, this is we're going to end it with that. I don't have anything else to add. You guys got anything else?
No.
Okay. We'll see you guys next time.
See you next time.